Welcome to another podcast episode of Nuggets with Sauce, Thought Leadership for Thoughtful Leaders, presented by me, Michelle Arntz. Wow, I can't believe I have got the most fabulous person on my program today. This is so exciting. Admira, oh my God, I am so loving having you here. You, first of all, hello, you just look brilliant because you are a reflection of your inner self and you are brilliant on the inside too. And we're going to unpack some of that today. So I'm super stoked that you're joining me. Now, as I always like to do when I'm introducing my guests on Nuggets with Sauce, we do not use our job titles. We know this. So I always like to kind of ask people, what's your why? What's the thing that fires you up, makes you feel passionate about what you're bringing to the world and making the world a better place? Now, I know about this, but I want to hear it from you. And I want our listeners and viewers to hear this as well. So Admira Adovic, please tell us what's getting you out of bed every day and firing you up in this world of business.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super stoked to be on your podcast. Oh my God, what brings me joy? Like what wakes me up? Honestly, for me is seeing more specifically female female-owned businesses make bigger impacts in the world we live in. That has been my joy and my why, and like every time I see it come through, it's just been like, yes, that's it.
I know we're going to talk more about that today, but I love that in that space. So I wanted you here. I mean, not that we don't want the guys running businesses to do these things too, but I know
they're fabulous as well. My male entrepreneurs, amazing. They're as amazing as they are.
Yeah, just guy doesn't mean you tune out right now. We got something for you too, right? Absolutely. So
absolutely.
Everybody in the pool. Love that. Love that. Do you have anything in terms of a recommendation, a read, a listen, or a watch or something that we could all benefit from?
Not necessarily. So if you know me, I am not a huge reader myself. Like the best, the most reading I have done is subtitles of a show. So if that counts as reading, I check that mark. But for me, I like to watch or listen to something that sparks my interest. Like I always like to learn new things, and languages have been my thing.
So much.
For a lot
learning. Yeah. See, first of all, I love you because you love to learn. Hello. Welcome to my world. Yeah. And the language piece. Yes.
I love languages, and my oldest son is just like that, which is just amazing. So lately I have been into Turkish language a lot. So I listen to Turkish music, even though a lot of it I don't understand. I watch Turkish shows because I find them entertaining, and I cannot watch them without volume on. I have to be listening to. There's something about the language that just intrigues me lately. So that has been my go-to.
I love that. As somebody who's married to a language teacher, I super duper appreciate that. And I think what really sparks me and what you're sharing there is that language is lived, right? Like the best way to kind of pick up language is immerse yourself in it, listen to the cultural cues. Like, what's the music like? Yeah, turn the volume up. Yes, check the subtitles if you need them. But I mean, if you really go back to the beginning, that's how we all really learn, is we're just immersed. We're just listening until we get it. So I love that you're in that space. And that's a really interesting part of your brain to challenge too. So of course
it is. I have now, at this point now, when I listen to music and there's certain words they say, I'm like, oh, I know what that means.
Yeah, I'm like, and especially challenging with music because, they're not just saying the word, they could be extending the word as well. So I admire that out of you. That is fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, really, I think that the bulk of our conversation, and, I'm so excited about this, but the bulk of our conversation, we're in this thought leadership space, and, I'm always trying to find different angles and different ways to get folks who are leaders to be thinking about like, hey, what about this? And I know you've got some excellent nuggets to share with us today, and we'll see how saucy we get, because I know how saucy you and I can get when we're chatting. So we'll see where this lands us. I don't know if we're going to bleep anything, but I'm simply saying But you're in that finance space, you're in that accounting space, the number space, but you have some really, I think, a really core and interesting dynamic. Like you've got a mindset approach to this that I don't know that a lot of people in the space are really thinking about. And I really in part wanted to unpack that further with you because I'm very intrigued by where you're coming from on this. And so I'm hoping you can, just share with me a little bit further on, what's this angle that you've got on the finance world and that other people are kind of missing out on.
Yeah, so I've been around finance my whole life. I don't necessarily, I have not chosen this path. I was thrown at it at a very early age.
Wow.
I was only 9 when my dad decided that he was going to talk to me in the form of numbers and challenge. And so what I would like, and I push this with my clients as well, is like, rather than looking at accounting and finance as something that they have to do, which is like, I have to file my taxes and therefore I have to do my bookkeeping and I have to. So rather than looking at it from like, I have to, looking at it from a perspective like, how does this benefit my business? How can this bookkeeping and having an accurate number make an impact in my business and help me run this business better and be able to get to that mission that I really want, which for most of my clients are very much those social impact mission driven. So like for them, it's like, no, but I want more of this profit so I can do more of this social impact work.
Right.
And so if we were to switch the mindset a bit, I think there will be so much bigger impact. We would run so much healthier businesses and grow them much faster, rather than looking from a perspective like, oh, I just have to do it. Because what happens with I just have to do it, they just hire somebody else to do it. And then they don't look at it. And then they just assume it's correct.
Right. It's a chore, like running your vacuum cleaner. I have to clean the house, but I'm not really gonna, woe is me. I get that because, like, believe me, I'm not exactly always the most fired up about, what you're saying. Oh, yeah, because who loves to pay taxes and calculate their taxes and, go over all the receipts or whatever. But I so love that idea of having that different mindset, that says, well, I don't, this is about knowing your finances enough, digging in a way that it's not a chore. It's a tool that you can use. I mean, I say all the time, we measure what matters, right? And of course, if we're not measuring it, I guess we don't care, which is a whole other episode for a bunch of screaming about stuff that we're missing out on. But like looking at your books from the angle that I understand you coming from is to say, hey, where can I use this information to help me further my business goals? Right. And then like the attitude shift, I think that comes from that too, right? Like, okay, well, I could see cleaning the house as a chore, or I could see it as like a creative way of having a workout, or I could see it as, I could use different words.
Yeah.
Right. And I me, I hate the idea of word washing. Like, don't call it something that it really kind of isn't. If it's a hot freaking mess, call it call it a problem. Don't get cute. But I think there's also something to be said for, back to what you were saying about languages, words have power. And so if we think about these things in different terms and we shift that mindset and we refocus a little bit, maybe we're going to get some different results this time around, where it says, oh, it's, it's not, maybe we do have to change some of the words, or we have to change the approach.
Honestly, for me, I think it's just a mindset. Because we can learn just about anything. If we want to, we can learn just about anything. Because that's how we're wired.
Try with math, have you?
I guarantee you that I can teach
my friend. Be careful.
But I mean, for part of me doesn't really necessarily, blame is the wrong word, but doesn't necessarily blame. Let's just use blame because I can't think of a better word. But I don't blame entrepreneurs for like thinking that it's difficult. I'm like, oh my God, it's difficult. It's like a foreign language. Like I don't understand it. because I spent quite a bit of time trying to understand why are they thinking this, because it's not that hard. Like if me 9-year-old can learn this, I mean, how hard can it possibly be? And then down the line, I learned that because my industry likes to use very fancy words that only people who have gone to school for freaking ages understand, nobody else does. Right. Therefore, when we use these big words with people who are not as
right
familiar with numbers, then they tend to scare away. They're like, oh my God.
I don't speak that language. I don't, it's intimidating, right? Like, I don't know half the,
and so
the first time I realized what the hell people were talking about when they were going P&L, what the hell is P&L? Of course, nobody took the time to explain anything. This was a while ago, but I'm just like, I didn't know. And of course, do you think I'm going to raise my hand and say, what does this mean? I don't want to admit that I don't even understand the language, let alone that I need to learn the language.
Right. And so from my perspective is, if you just had a little bit of curiosity, and I hear you, I probably would do the same. Like if I'm sitting in a marketing meeting and they use these acronyms for, like, I had a client who used MMR, MSMR, and I'm like, oh my God, what is that? Like, I just, and then at some point,
that's the number on the price sticker on a car.
And then I'm like, at some point I was just like, I'm so sorry, what does that mean? And so I literally raised my hand and asked. But what I'm saying is, like, just have a little bit of curiosity, and then find there is the right people and the right tools out there that do make things simple. Like at Care CFOs, for us, we don't use any fancy words,
right?
At all, because our goal is, okay, you're curious, great, we want to develop on it, like we want to work on this, like we want to keep you curious enough so that eventually you get to the point where we're going to teach you what these big words mean, but we're not going to start with them. Right. And it's the same thing in language, if you think about it. Like when they start teaching you, they start with alphabet.
Yeah. Think how kids learn, you're a mom, you've got little ones. I mean, you just point at things and you blurt out words, and then they start making word associations,
And then eventually they read the whole sentence.
Right. We don't start with the sentence, we build up to it. And so from that finance mindset standpoint is like, you got to start somewhere. And start smaller. And I think, maybe that's also the flip side. Maybe that's some of the mindset improvement. So if anybody's watching or listening to this and you are in that finance space, think about how you could shift your mindset to help your clients or prospective clients who might be holding back otherwise, or maybe they're even scared to approach you in the first place. They could be your client. Because I love what you're saying. Okay, that absolutely hits home for me, is like, yeah, please don't jam 500, industry standard pieces of lingo down my throat. I don't understand you. Can you please speak my language? I mean, this is why I use analogies all the time, because I'm trying to make mental equations in my head and say, oh, if I can relate it to this, it'll make sense to me.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
They had nothing to do with my latest one, that I was explaining how key performance indicators work. I was using
called KPIs.
Yeah, the KPI. So I was saying, like, imagine having a bucket full of holes. Pouring more water into it is not going to fill up the bucket, will it? And most people say it will not. So that's KPIs. So you have to fix those key performance indicators first before you keep pouring more revenue into the bucket. Otherwise, you're not gonna grow the business. So I do it all the time. And people look at me like, wow, you're not typical. I'm like, yeah, no, I know. I'm still that 9-year-old.
Because you're not typical.
I'm still a 9-year-old like girl in front of an ice cream fridge, having that teach me like finance. Like that's me with clients, literally. And let me tell you, I love it. Like I so just want to stay in that space. Like I mean, years later, I should probably grow up, but I still want to be that 9-year-old.
Don't ever lose that spark, because especially in the finance world, there's not always a lot of sparkiness going on. So, and don't ever lose that. But I think that foundational experience of your dad, seeing something in you at an early age, and of course, making it easy for your 9-year-old self to grasp, that's half the battle right there. So what was his mindset? I'm not going to throw the accounting book at my daughter. I'm going to stand in front of the ice cream and we're going to talk concepts and things in ways that, and that mindset there that he was, he was grabbing your curiosity and he was relating it to your world. And no wonder you grabbed on early. You probably naturally have an affinity for it anyway, but he,
at this point.
right. And I think that that's something that's so critical that we don't always think about is do I have a natural gravitation towards something in the first place? Like I am not going to do the kind of work that you do, because believe me, I'm not naturally aligned to that. But I so get it in the sense of, I care about the money too. I always just come at it from a different angle from my perspective in the work world. But I love the idea of mindset. Your thinking changes your perception and your perspective, and therefore your approach, both within your own head and how you're going to, put that out into the world within your business. How are you talking about this if you have staff? How do we talk about our finances on that level? Do they understand, or half the room sitting there going, what's P&L? Right.
So that's the second piece of that I advocate for with my small business entrepreneurs is getting the teams more involved. And so and obviously we find the right time for this. Like if the entrepreneur, he himself or herself is still trying to learn this, obviously we're not gonna say like, oh, let's get the team. Right. No. Well, once the business owner has grasped the basic, understands how this impacts their business, understands like all of this piece, and it takes a minute for that to happen. That's when the next level, I always tell my entrepreneurs, look, now what would make it more powerful and what would take your business next level is, rather than doing this yourself, get the team to support you in this. The biggest problem though is that you're asking the team to support and you give them random goals, whatever, but they do not understand how their contribution to the business relates or translates into numbers and how the impact that business is making.
Right.
Why? Because every business likes to hide the numbers from their employees. I'm like, from one perspective, I understand. From the other perspective, I'm like, well, if you educate them enough, then you don't have to be hiding things.
Right. And I think, do you get the sense that part of, you hear a lot of people in the last number of years, there's been a lot of talk about, workers want transparency where they work, and I'd had on a prior episode, I was talking to my good buddy Chasen Forehand, and we were talking about like, the whole thing with layoffs, like, oh, you get, T-boned at the intersection when all of a sudden you discover something's gone horribly wrong in the business, to the financial point that we're now, getting rid of our human assets, which is just horrendous in its own right. Where was back up? Where was the conversation prior to this? Where was the transparency to a degree that maybe said, hey, let's get our staff connected with this stuff, get them, maybe they don't have to know every single thing, but knowledgeable enough that they can see the picture, they can see where they fit into that picture. And okay, let me throw this one at you and you tell me what you think, Admira. Should we maybe not have them involved enough as well to be able to say like, if something starts to look like it could potentially go off the rails, maybe somebody on your staff is going to be creative and clever enough to see red flags, or maybe even have some ideas and solutions for that? Do you see that happening?
Well, for clients or for business owners that do get the team involved, I will just give you this one example. It was March 2020, actually was May at this point. We know what happened in 2020. COVID hit, everything went off the rails. And I had this client of mine, just 90% of her contracts canceled. Everything canceled at that point. So it was just crazy.
Huge hit.
It was huge. So we ran scenarios with her, and she had to either let go staff, reduce salaries for staff, or combination of both. And so she did combination of both. And what I had advised her at the time is that, look, what I want you to do now is go in front of the people you have and be an open book. And she's like,
open accounting and ledger book.
An
Yeah.
open book, like literally open book. And I said to her, like,
Transparency, honesty.
yeah, transparency. And she did.
Mhm.
And her team stayed with her through COVID.
Wow.
Um, and to this day, they're still with her.
Mhm.
And this is like years later, right?
Yeah.
And yes, she did cut their salaries at that particular time because she just had no money to pay them.
Mhm.
And then end of 2020 is when she put everybody back to their normal salaries and back paid all of the time that she took away from them.
Who is this amazing human being who actually, oh my God, I'm loving this story. But I mean, let's just, these nuggets, you're dropping too many nuggets in the basket right now all at once, but I'm loving this. I think about that. So your advice was, we got problems with the books. Did you say 90% of the contracts gone? Holy Dinah. Okay, so get open and honest with your staff, share the situation. And I love what you're saying in this space. If she didn't get rid of everybody, I'm assuming therefore her staff were like, well, I'd rather have a partial paycheck than none. She was able to get back on track. They stuck with her because she had the mindset, you helped her get there, but have that mindset that said, we need to talk about numbers. I need you guys to understand why. Here's where we're at. Why?
Yep. And then also help her get out of it too,
Right.
which was also an important piece. And again, could they have found another job? Maybe yes, maybe not.
So
Could they could just like
talent if you don't have to?
but let's also not forget that they could have gotten a choice to go on unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time there was so many stipends around unemployment and stuff, like there was like government was paid, federal
there was
everybody was
a lot of rescue plan going on back then.
not exactly, but her team decided to trust her, stay with her, and then commit to her. And so, but would they have done it had they not have transparency? I don't know, but I have seen it more times than not where if you don't have, if you're not honest and transparent, people don't stick around. Like why should I sacrifice?
There's no trust. If you don't trust me enough with pertinent information in this business, and I think that what I'm getting out of this too, and I love this, is what this is making me think of is I'm trying to connect the dots here in the sense of people also really want a sense of connection and purpose in their work. And the closer you can get them to the customer is usually the sweet spot. Like the more they feel like, oh, I make a difference. I'm not just the bee in the hive that nobody notices when I'm not around. And what you're talking about, at least in my head, is connecting those dots and saying, again, that transparency, that honesty, getting people connected to here's where the finances are in our business also helps people understand, because where does that money come from? It comes from the customers.
Yeah.
So what could we be, and you're trusting me enough to share that kind of information with me so I don't feel like I'm over at arm's length and my leaders are, God only knows what they're doing behind closed doors. It's probably going to impact me at some point, but I don't, like how much of that mental energy is just wasted on the not knowing.
Let's also not forget that in the media world that we live in, there's so much talk about executives making the millions and billions. So a typical employee, they don't know that small business is not same level. It's a business in their view.
Right.
And they're not necessarily thinking, especially if you only see the revenue piece.
Right.
Like, this company is making a lot of money. This is great. Yeah, but do you know what it takes to run a business? Like how much cost goes into it? What about like enabling us to do all these impact work for them specifically? They like to do projects at cost. There was social impact projects. And so once you start putting the dots together for the employees, which in our case, we kept telling them that health of the business, which translate to gross profit margin. You kept saying, like, oh, we need it at X amount %. And And then I explained the why. So the biggest thing I do with employee training is like explain the whys and how that ties to exactly the work they do. So in their particular case, it's like, we need this margin to be at X number, because this will enable us to then take these other projects that we make no money on, but they are social impact. So we're making a lot of impact on them. But we have to find ways to pay for it because they're not free.
Right.
So once we start putting those dots together for them,
Yeah.
they were just overly motivated. So they were like, yes, yeah, absolutely. We're going to work on this. And next thing you know, so many creative questions start coming out of them. Like these are not finance people. And then I sit in the meeting and then I'm like, brilliant question. Like I would expect this question from a finance person to come out, not someone. So that's the piece of
mindset shift. I think that has to be part of the mindset shift too, is that we can get blinders on when we stay too close to the particular subject, right? Sometimes it's having that outside perspective. It's the Dingledorf like me who comes in and says, I don't know what you're talking about, but like, and therefore the kinds of, I will probably see things or ask questions around things that nobody else is thinking of, because I'm not making assumptions, because I'm not that close to it. I think that was brilliant and I'm not surprised, but I love hearing stories like that where people were like, oh, once you get the staff at all levels involved and demystify some of it. And I always love to start with why. Simon Sinek, one of my heroes, but give them the why. And then see
what and related to their line of work.
This
which
is
very
why
important.
We need you to do this. This is why you matter over here. This is why you make a difference. This is the why of maybe we're asking our staff to do something differently than they've ever done before, because if we can move that dial, we can impact that many more, whatever it is that you're doing. We can help that many more of our customers. We can pour that much more money into our community. We can reinvest back into the business. Hey, maybe we could hire more people if we could move the dial in this direction. So once they know that, because I think it's just like, it's this top secret crap that happens over here that nobody talks about. I mean, I see this, my angle's a little different too, but how many people don't even understand when you were talking a moment ago about the, what does it take to run the business and where's this money going? And especially on the smaller business side, like, no, I don't think they're really lining their pockets. We're not talking the CEO of a large corp who's making, 500 times what their average worker is. That's another episode for me to foam at the mouth. But in that space of like, they don't even understand, like, they see their paycheck, but are they even thinking about, like, if you're getting benefits, what is it really? They don't even understand what it really costs to have one employee, two employees, because they see the paycheck, but they don't see the full compensation value. Connect those dots, have that mindset that says this doesn't need to be top secret. In fact, just the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, giving them just enough to understand. And then again, what you're trying to accomplish with it, not necessarily like, oh, we'll just trying to prove ourselves, because nobody cares.
Right.
What employees particularly care about, like, how are they contributing to this?
Right.
So a lot of times we just get lost in the work we do, and like we just don't know how we're contributing. And when you hear about people lose motivation, well, yeah, because has anybody just had them step back and just be like, okay, let's just talk about all the things we accomplished. And this particular client, what she does every year, a good and a bad, she's sharing. Yeah. She's like, okay, here's our graph. 2020, 2020.
Not good.
It was, it is what it is. 2021, it was a little better. 2022 was great. This is what we're looking for in 2023. And here's why. And this is how your help will get us there. Yeah. And so, one, you get a team that is more dedicated. There's so much less turnover in a business if you get a team to stand behind your mission.
They're engaged because they see where they fit in to the, dare I say, equation. Sorry, that was a little punny and pathetic, but I'm just saying, people don't see where they fit into the equation. They don't know how to add it up. And so you're absolutely right. You're going to get that loyalty. You're going to get that motivation because they finally get engaged. They actually feel like somebody gives a damn.
Yeah. And I've had one other client that he kept having constant turnover. And his excuse was like, oh, well, just people are leaving because of salary. I'm like, I guarantee you that's not true. Like, it's like, sure, some of them probably do, but majority of them don't. And if you look at the research that has been done there by big companies, I haven't done it, but big companies, most people will take a lower salary if there is other impacts that fulfill them.
Yes. Yes, there's definitely validated research, and that has been coming for a while. And that has, I mean, particularly, I believe this is aligned with our millennial generation in the workforce. They, they're money. I mean, yes, to a certain degree, money matters. We don't, work for free. That's called volunteering, which is a wonderful thing to do, but it's not gonna, it's not gonna pay for the groceries. But, when people are going to leave you for $1 or $2 more an hour, so to speak, money isn't the issue.
Nope.
The disconnect is much deeper than the paycheck. I mean, I literally was in a break room at a place one time where people were talking about applying for a job down the road. I'm not making this up, Admira, 25 cents more an hour.
Wow.
25 cents more an hour. And they were talking about, well, I think I'm going to put an application down the road. That is not a money issue.
Nope. It's not a money issue.
And when we bring it full circle, we think about, and we're going to have a whole other conversation talking about costs around the turnover and things, one of my favorite flavors, but you start calculating, if you're like that guy you were talking about where, oh, I think it's this and it's turning. Okay, first of all, the panic lights should be going off at this point. And you do some basic calculations on turnover cost. It is costing you a lot more than what it would take to invest a little bit back into your people to re-engage them, get their trust, get them on board, be transparent with them. I mean, it's hugely expensive to have talent walk away because you didn't have the mindset to say, I'm going to be a little more of an open book. I mean, keep it legal and keep it reasonable. We understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I never suggest my clients that just open everything.
Right.
Within reason. Within reason, whatever is shareable, we share. And then we want to share it in a form that they can consume it in the right way. So yes, there goes some work behind the scenes of like how we share things that is not, Yeah.
Be appropriate, be a good leader, share the right things. But when you don't communicate that, when you don't share, when you don't involve and engage people, and you lack that mindset that says, hey, we're all in this together, you're not gonna go nearly as far as business leaders who are like, hey, I need my people to understand. We're all better off when we're all better educated about fundamentals of our business, including the finances. Everybody in my organization should have some basic vocabulary, common language. We're back to language, common language, how we use these terms, how they get used around here, how we connect to those things. Hello. I mean, you can't move the dial in the right direction with that combo.
And I will say that I also have seen it where the owner would go the complete opposite way, which is like just demanding people do certain things without even a why. And I'll never forget that once I was in one of the meetings and I was like, well, the resource managers are just not doing the work. And I'm like, well, have we talked to them? Do they not understand the impact that this is making? Well, I don't want to talk. Like, they just need to do it. And I'm like,
how's that working for you?
I mean, obviously it's not since they were not delivering that well. But it's not the thing is that it's not that people don't want to do it. It's not that people don't want to do their work. It's the problem is that they don't understand why do they need to do this.
Right.
And how it's impacting what, because let's face it, if you tell people, resource manager, right? So his or her job is to do the resources. So they're already overwhelmed with that work. But now you're going to ask them to like, you need to add the numbers. You need to add all these numbers into these 3 different systems. I mean, if I was in their position, be like, I already have enough to figure out the resources. And now you're going to ask me to add it into 3 systems?
Yeah.
Like, why? And then you don't explain the why, but you just tell
Right.
them, you need to do it. This is your job.
Right.
Who's going to be motivated by that?
Right. Or make sure that they don't really have the tools in their toolbox to get that job done either. So go ahead and demand stuff from them, but make sure that it, you know, I'm being very facetious when I say this, but that, yeah, that is the equation that lands up with a big fat 0 at the end of the day, because you're not going to get ahead. You're not going to get the results that you're looking for.
And he didn't. He did
No.
not get the
Oh,
results.
no.
He constantly kept having
No.
problem after problem, because you were going about it the wrong way.
Right.
Like, I don't understand how to explain it, but
Yeah.
anyway.
It's totally different, you know, and again, that's the power of the mindset and the perspective and the approach. And oh man, we could keep talking about this forever. We're going to have you back, Admira. We're absolutely going to have another podcast conversation, because there's so much more that we could explore in this realm that I think is so valuable. So thank you so much for these fabulous little nuggets that you brought today, because I think that if anything, kickstart some thinking around hey, maybe if I've been holding back, it's time that I open up a little bit more and see what magic happens when I build that trust and transparency and I start educating and connecting the dots around my business numbers. Everybody has a stake in that. So I love that you've shared that wisdom with us today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Nuggets with Sauce. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe so you get notified with new episodes as they come out. In the meantime, focus on setting yourself up for success and others too.